Good
Hey, Freeman.
afternoon, Dr. Hrabowski. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Jonathan Oleski with JMOR, and our show is about to begin. To all of our guests, we want you to maximize your experience, so we recommend that you put your Zoom screen on speaker view. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our wonderful hosts, Beth Goldsmith, Chair-elect of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and Dr. Scott Rifkin, publisher of JMOR. Beth and Scott, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan, and welcome again to The Upside. This is our virtual show brought to you by the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore and JMOR Magazine to keep our Baltimore Jewish community informed during this time of uncertainty. We will now be coming to you weekly on Tuesdays with episodes you can view live on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Each episode will tackle some of today's most pressing topics, feature some of the community's leading experts, and answer the questions that are on all our minds. Today, we'll be talking about what colleges and universities are proposing for the fall semester. Faced with a number of challenges around COVID-19, universities across the country are balancing their reopening plans with the need to provide a safe learning environment. We will look at some of the options, how these options will impact students' plans for the semester, and what the broader financial implications are for higher education. Scott, please introduce our guest.
Thank you. Freeman, it's so good to see you.
Thank you.
We're thrilled you were nice enough to do this. I know how busy you are. Let me give our listeners, we have viewers, Freeman, that watch us live, but a lot of folks see us on YouTube and on Facebook, and about 1,000 to 1,500 folks. And I suspect with you as the guest, that might be double this week. So let me give a little background on Freeman. I've been just thrilled to know Freeman for 20 plus years now, where Freeman was a neighbor and a friend and a special person in the life of my family. And to give Freeman's back, let me give a little background, Freeman, and you'll help us sort of fill in the missing parts. Dr. Hrabowski grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, as the son of educators, and was a math major at Hampton University, went on to get a PhD out of the University of Illinois system in both higher education and in statistics. Did I get that right, Freeman? Statistics.
Sure.
I never understood. And got a PhD, and he has been an amazing person in our community. Came to Baltimore and became the president of UMBC 20 more years ago, and has led that campus from being a sleepy little commuter school to being one of the nation's real gems of universities. Named by U.S. News and World Report at least half a dozen times as an up-and-coming university. And becoming a leader in the education of Black students in the sciences. And I want to make sure that Freeman talks a little bit about that in the Meyerhoff Program. And on a personal level, and it's never personal because Freeman and UMBC are one and the same in many ways. But Freeman has been named as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time Magazine, one of the top 10 university presidents in the country, and even had a piece on 60 Minutes, one of those nice complimentary pieces, not just about Freeman, but about UMBC and the amazing role in STEM education that UMBC has taken. So for those who wonder whether the best school in the state is who it is, it's UMBC. It's a hidden gem that if you have a chance to send your child there, they're going to walk away with a great education and be prepared for the future. So Freeman, thank you for being here. And would you mind filling in a little of the gaps in your background in education? And then we'll ask you lots of questions. Our main topic today was going to be how COVID is affecting the university and the plans of the school, but there's so much more to talk to you about.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. And first of all, I'm delighted to say you are a graduate and your son is a graduate and now MD, PhD. That's as much as I need to say. And in terms of my education, the one thing I would say is that my parents taught me to be excited about learning and reading, and from knowing so much about the Jewish community and the importance of learning and reading and thinking, I think those skills are more important now than ever before. UMBC was actually founded the year I graduated from high school in 1966. And the one point about the university that I think is especially significant is that we were founded to bring in students of all backgrounds. At a time when the world was totally segregated, we brought in kids from all races, and now we have students on campus from 100 countries. And so it is a campus of the world in many ways. And so as we think about COVID, we have to think about what happens in our country, but also what happens in humankind as we prepare leaders to go around the world and focus on these issues. Let me stop there and take your questions.
So let me start with one. And it goes to your history. And I think it's really an issue of our day. You were at the forefront of the civil rights movement in Birmingham, Alabama. You were one of the children that was arrested by Bull Connor in the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama, which was a critical moment of change for this country. Spend a couple minutes on that and that experience, please.
Sure. I was not a courageous kid. I was a math nerd. I've always gotten goosebumps during math. And I'm sitting in the back of church, and Dr. King is the guest speaker in the middle of the week. I was not wanting to be there. My parents placated me by allowing me to do my math, but I did hear him talking, and he said something that excited me. He said, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our children know the difference between right and wrong, and they want a great education, and they'll be able to go to better schools. And that really stuck a note with me, because we had some wonderful teachers. We didn't have the resources. We used hand-me-down books from white schools. It was not a positive situation. And I wanted the best possible education. And so I did go and to protest, and I did spend a horrific week in jail, but it was also empowering. And the theme that Dr. King gave us is one I want us to remember today. And it is, he said, that tomorrow can be better than today, and that each of us can be empowered to get involved in the work to make tomorrow better for all children and people. And that was the story, and that inspired me in my life to be involved in education.
Very good. So comment, if you can, and maybe connect the dots to what's going on today in what really is an extension of that civil rights movement.
Sure. And make no mistake, our country has made progress. Having a UMBC, bringing in students of all backgrounds, my becoming the president of a university, at the time a predominantly white university, now one of the world, those things could not have happened in the 60s. And so we certainly have made progress, and yet we have so much work to do for people in general, for poor people. Structural racism is alive. You just look at the criminal justice system, look at the violence we see in the community. Police brutality is just one aspect of the problems that we face. The fact is that whether talking about healthcare or the academic achievement gap or criminal justice or income disparity, we have a lot of work to do. And the key for me is that we will need, beyond the protests, to use our ability to think critically as we consider policies and laws that can change the structure of our country and the way some people are disproportionately impacted over other people. And at the heart of that is the same thing we said in the 60s. We have to also make sure people are voting. We don't want to tell people whom to vote for, but we do want people to vote and to look at the records of people and think about what they see as the most important values those elected officials should have. And that's voting at every level, local through national.
So you started an amazing program early on in your tenure, the Meyerhoff Program, with Robert Meyerhoff working with you. Talk a little bit about the program, how you formulated it, where it came from, and the unbelievable results you've had.
Sure. I have to start by saying that it really was prophetic that Bob Meyerhoff asked me the question in the mid-'80s, what can we do to help young Black males? And he was very specific about that. He had been working at Goucher doing a number of things to help women in general, but he and Jane at the time were interested in understanding what they could do to make a difference, to have a more positive impact on young Black males. Because what he saw on TV, besides sports, would be people in handcuffs, going to jail, people with guns. And we talked about the problem of the paucity of African Americans in science. That the fact is that at that time, under 1% of the scientists at any of the national agencies are Black, were Black at that time. Today, it's still not quite 2%. But the fact is that he worked with us and with our faculty to develop a program that has become the leading program in the country. We were saying for predominantly white universities, but for any institutions, we now lead the country in producing African Americans who go on to complete MD PhDs from Harvard to Stanford. But we are doing that for students of all races. That's the other part, that we've been helping to produce many more Blacks, but also many more people of all races who are becoming scientists and physicians like you, engineers, and on the other hand, working to produce a number of people in the social sciences, humanities, and the arts.
And 40% of your graduates now are in the sciences.
Yes, between 40 and 50% actually are in science and engineering. And it is significant that 40% of all of our students go immediately to graduate school or professional school. And what most people don't understand is that these students tend to go to MD, PhD programs almost always with funding from federal government or from the university. They're not paying for this. They're going to be helping the country. And people who go to PhD programs, the same thing. They get full fellowships from MIT and Harvard out to Stanford and Berkeley, down to over to Hopkins, to Maryland, to other places. So it's a great story, really.
And the 60 Minutes piece was about a Duke MD PhD, if I recall correctly.
Yes, yes. And he has just won the leading young investigator in neuroscience award in the world. In the world. I want people to understand it. This is a young Black man who grew up in Maryland, who has just become the leading young neuroscientist, young meaning under 45 or so, but in the world, according to the Neuroscience Society of the world. He has developed a pacemaker for addressing bipolar and schizophrenia. And he is now tenured faculty at Duke. So it's quite a story. The other story, though, that I think people here would like to hear is that the leading scientist who has developed had the team that developed the vaccine that is now the furthest along in development, about to go to phase 3 trials at Moderna, coming out of NIH, is a Meyerhoff scholar, a young Black woman who grew up in rural North Carolina, came to UMBC, then went on to grad school at Chapel Hill, came back to NIH, but she is the leading scientist in this work. And when the White House comes over to NIH, she is in that room explaining what's going on. Dr. Fauci uses her a great deal. This is history making. It is definitely history making. How many people have ever heard, we don't hear of enough women creating vaccines, and then of a Black woman. So this is history making. And then another student who is not minority, a wonderful middle-class young white woman from Frederick, Maryland, UMBC again, went to Hopkins and for the PhD, and then MIT, is leading the major study at NIH to look at the impact of asymptomatic patients. Asymptomatic people are on COVID right now for the country right now. So we got 2 women from UMBC leading these major COVID efforts there. Then finally, Meyerhoffs include the Surgeon General of the country, all the way to the Health Commissioner of Baltimore City.
Wow, I'm jumping in as a
Yes,
woman,
please,
as a woman in Baltimore. I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this and enlightening us. I mean, those are some really amazingly wonderful things, and I want to keep talking about students. I want to talk about students today caught up in this maelstrom. What about kids who have difficulty with online learning? What can we do to help, and what is being done to help?
It's an excellent question, and congratulations on your role with the Associated, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have so much respect for the Associated. Here's what I would say. We have used the theme of flexibility. So for students who had problems with Wi-Fi, or students who didn't have computers, we have given them, we have loaners they can use, and places where they can come on campus even. We have very few students on campus now, but there are those there. There are some there because they had no place to go, either because they couldn't get back to their country or they're from Baltimore City and they just can't be at home. So we do have hundreds of students. You know, we have 14,000 students in general, of whom almost about 11,000 are undergrads, and almost half of the students live on campus normally. But now, right now, we have a much smaller number, and they're socially distanced. But the point is, for students who either didn't have a home or a computer or Wi-Fi exposure or access, we have found a way to give them the help that they need, and we will continue to do that. But in general, we have used this as a time to think about the meaning of community, and this notion that we are in this together, and we must listen to the needs of our students, but also our staff and our faculty. People have all kinds of medical conditions. People were having to learn how to use the technology in teaching and learning. Many had used it before. We are working individually and in small groups with people to make sure they feel a part of something. When people feel that they are a part of a community, they have the support they need to make it through. It gives them hope. And that's been the most important message for the UMBC community.
What are you hearing from your students about plans for the fall?
Right. You've got two groups. Some who are saying, we want to be on campus. We want to be on campus. And others who are saying, I don't know if we should be on campus or not. We are being very conservative. Some students will be there, but the majority of our classes are going to be online. Again, we will be finishing, and those students who are on campus, and it will be some proportion, but a much smaller proportion, because, for example, the residence halls, we don't believe you should have two people in a room. And so we would only have one in a room, you see. We're doing everything we can to have social distancing among a smaller group of students. We'll have opportunities for some to come on campus, for some experiences, but many more will be working through virtual means, through the technology. And we're explaining to them that we're listening very carefully to our public health experts and to public health experts out of the Maryland Medical School. We're working very closely with the University System of Maryland. We're fortunate to have Jay Perman, who is a physician, who's leading the effort and cares about us all. And so presidents of all of our campuses are from Towson to College Park. All of us meet several times per week to look at best practices. And so what we're saying to families, number one, health and safety of your children, of your partners, of your spouses, whoever is a student there. And number two, the key principles we're using, quality of the academic experience, teaching and learning. And number two, keeping people in mind at all times. The importance of the safety and health, and right now, quite frankly, of job security for people. People are worried about their jobs. I talk about the problems we're having right now. The economy, as you know, is very challenging, and we have numbers of middle-class people who've lost jobs or been laid off for a while. And so we are working very hard to find ways to support people in the funding of their education. And that means a variety of approaches that we might be using.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
You want to pick it up?
Oh, sure. So it sounds to me like the plan is to be fully open for first semester in the fall.
It's fully open, yes, fully open, with the understanding, though, that as was the case this past spring, the second half of the spring, that the students will be taking courses online and many will still be at home. We have, again, students from all over the world. Some are still here. Some will be doing online from other countries. Others will be doing online because they're living in New York. We have a lot of students who come from the New York, New Jersey area. For the first semester, depending on the program and the courses, they will be doing things online. But some students will be on campus in labs. We are finding all kinds of creative ways of using the technology in labs, for example. And so we're learning things now that will be helpful for the future, even when we're not in the midst of COVID.
So talk about that for a minute. Where does the world go in higher education? Do we go to universities where many of the students are online, and does that change the cost structure? Does that change the eligibility of students? You could be taking students from all over the world while they're still all over the world.
Sure, and we do some of that now. We've always had courses that are taught simultaneously for our faculty who are spending a year in India, for example, in working with the Indian Institute of Technology. So there's a lot of use of technology right now because we're trying to teach our students how to work with humankind around the world. And so this will be a part of it anyway. Some people who are not as familiar with the latest technology will always assume that in-face is always superior. Make no mistake, there's something about the face-to-face experience that is very good. I think what we will see will be a hybrid approach. For many students, they will have courses on in classrooms, face-to-face, but I've heard wonderful faculty in the humanities talk about having conversations about literature in this format. You can do a lot interacting and discussing and seeing your facial expressions right here more than ever. So we shouldn't be so closed-minded to say, oh, the only way is face-to-face. That's just not the case. There will be more and more hybrid approaches to the work we're doing. And quite frankly, because we are both heavily humanities and arts-based and heavily science, we're looking at the impact of technology and human-centered computing itself, because we're going to see the world change dramatically in this line between humanity and technology. And it's important to have courses in ethics, courses that focus on bioscience, but also that focus on impact of technology on how we interact with each other. We'll be doing all of that more and more.
Very good.
And what about student services beyond classroom? So
yes.
Clearly, when you're on campus, there are different issues than when you're home. I'd love to hear how counseling services and things like that are happening.
Sure. And a lot of you already know, you see what medical places are doing. Telemedicine, we're doing a lot of telework right now, and telecounseling in telemedicine, as you might expect. So many students, like the regular population, will have emotional and psychological challenges because of this period. And we consider it very healthy when people can talk about what they're experiencing, whether it's depression, anxiety. These things are very real. Years ago, only the most privileged of people would be willing to talk with their psychiatrist. Now, more and more people in general are understanding that the healthier we are, the more we admit what problems we're having, so we can get some expert help. And you can get that help through technology. We are doing it through the counseling center, through our medical work that we have going on right now with doctors and nurses. We're doing it in looking at career services. You'd be surprised. There are now technology-based career fairs. A lot of students are getting jobs through career fairs taught through Zoom. You can interview. More and more people are interviewing this way because I can see your face. I can see if you know how to smile with people, right? You know, I can see how you respond to what I'm saying. And so we're learning how to do much more of that. And we're teaching our students how to do that. I think people confuse the texting and emailing with this kind of technology. I mean, the big concern people had was the students weren't learning how to work with people face to face. Well, we can do a lot of this way. Doesn't take the place of in the same room, but it is very close. It really is. The more and more refined the technology becomes, the more we will be able to teach students how to use this whenever it's necessary. But we are working to give all those services to our students, and quite frankly, to spend time helping them understand how we, again, are defining support and community and high expectations of ourselves. You know, we say to freshmen and new students, look at the student to your left, look at the student to your right. Now, we say their parents were told that means one of them would not graduate. Everybody heard that. Look at the student to your left, look at the student to your right. One of you will not graduate. That's a terrible thing to say to students. We say, look at the student to your left, look at the student to your right. Our goal is to make sure all three of you graduate, and we don't plan to fail. And it's that high expectation that makes a difference. I have a TED Talk that talks about high expectations in science, and it's literally 4 pillars of success in science. And it's all about expecting the most of ourselves as university people and expecting the most of our students. It's when you have high expectations on both sides, you can get so much more done to support those students.
So Freeman, brag for a minute about UMBC and your success with retention and graduation.
Sure, and you know, I'm so proud of my colleagues because they work so hard to do this. We have, you know, some people I live here in Owings Mills, and people live in Pikesville, other places. And a lot of students like you came from this area to UMBC. And at that time, some of you are old enough to remember the term UMBEC. We called UMBC UMBEC. But we don't do that anymore. That sounds like UCLA, right? We are UMBC. But in that period, the highest achieving students like you, Scott, did well. But unfortunately, a lot of students didn't have the preparation to do well, and they didn't make it. And so the graduation rates were like they are in the country right now. For public universities, the average graduation rate is probably in the 40-some%. You know, so most students were not doing well. But today we're up to 70%. And that's that's considered quite good. But the reason for that is that many of our students, first of all, are planning to go to programs down at the Maryland Medical Center. They're going into physical therapy, medical technology. In those programs, you don't need to get a degree. You take the courses and then you transfer down, and that makes a big difference. It really does. So our students are doing well, but most important, 40% are going on to grad school, and that's of all races. It's very important. And then the final point I would make, though, is when you look at our graduates, when I tell you the president of the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab has his PhD from UMBC, that the head of the chief information officer at Hopkins University just until recently was a woman graduate of UMBC, that the president of Clemson University will tell you he's just a middle-class white kid from Baltimore County. He's not the president of Clemson with a private jet. He's a UMBC graduate with all 3 degrees. You know,
Freeman, you don't have a private jet? Come on.
He's not a private jet. It's the university jet. It's a Clemson jet. Football, all those big football schools have jets. We have a chess team. We are always usually national chess champions or in the top group and top in cyber. We don't have a jet. I like saying Southwest is my jet.
So Freeman, you're one of the great people. You know, I've walked around campus with you where you knew every kid who walked by name and what project they were working on, which is pretty remarkable. How are you doing with this, being isolated like this? You know, you're also a guy who gets on a plane and travels and gives lots of talks. How are you doing?
Sure. You know, believe it or not, when you hear people talking now, they will say, I'm going to be on a call, not on a call, I'm going to a meeting in Chicago. Well, they're talking about a Zoom meeting in Chicago. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been with the University of California, was on one with people out at Arizona State all yesterday. And it's almost as if you're there because you're talking as we are right now. But I'm doing well. I'm a strong believer in keeping positive, in believing in hope. We're realistic in looking at the challenges, but believing in hope. But it's our students and our alumni who are people to inspire us. You know, when I tell you that the Speaker of the House, the first woman Speaker of the House, Adrienne Jones, earned her degree from UMBC, who had been just a little kid in Arbutus. And she was able to come to UMBC, get that education, work in Baltimore County, and do all the things that she's doing. That the county executive has his PhD from UMBC. What is my point? What gives me hope is that education transforms lives. That if you look at people in our cities and counties and all of you, of every race, the people who are leaders tend to be people who got that education. In the 60s, you all may not know it, but only 10% of Americans had graduated from college. It was only 3% of blacks, but it was only 11% of whites. So most people in the 60s in America had never gotten a college degree. And it was because of that civil rights protest that we moved to the Higher Education Act in 1965 and to Pell Grant in the early 70s. And now we have something like 30-some% of all Americans over 25 have college degrees. About 40% for whites, about 25% for blacks. We got to push it up for Hispanics. It's about 50% for Asians. But the point is, when you look at the educated population in our country, and for 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees, and you look at who are the leaders, you see people who are educated. Now, that gives me hope on the one hand, but it also teaches me that we have more work to do at universities to teach people of all types how to work together, how to listen to different perspectives, how to understand that all the problems we face must be considered using different perspectives, different voices, different academic disciplines, if we are to solve those problems. And the hope comes because I can think about myself as a little black kid in Birmingham with no dream of coming this far, and I know how far I've come. And when I talk to every family, whether it's your family, Scott, or yours, Beth, you go back 2 or 3 generations, people did not expect you to get to where you are today. And that has everything to do both with education, but also with who we are as Americans. And so, I mean, even as we talk about being much better, I'm always saying to people, but let's not forget what has brought us to this point.
Very good. So I had some folks at the house this week. Their 17-year-old senior son is debating whether to start college in the fall or to take a gap year. What's your suggestion to those students out there?
I'm going to say to parents, it all depends on your child and what your child needs. Sometimes children are either burned out or they just need time to mature, and having some other experience can be helpful. So I want to say that first. But I would say this, I am a strong believer in trying to excite the child about learning. And yes, there's all kind of learning somebody can do. And people know their kid, whether or not you get off and you don't get back on track or not. That's another piece of it. Some people know, well, my child will always go back to college and they want this experience. And so that's a possibility. We have students, we've always had students who will go and spend a year in Israel. And they come back and they are amazing because of the experiences they've had. But their parents knew they were so focused, they were going to get back into college and use those experiences. So that can be excellent depending on the child, on the student. But I would also say, this is a great opportunity to learn a lot about humankind, about American society through the coursework one takes, through the challenges that we're facing. And quite frankly, I know of students who will be deciding to do some things and take courses online. You know, some of our students, while taking the courses online, can still be doing other things. I mean, Jim Collins in the book Good to Great talks about the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. In other words, one might decide to do some part-time work or whatever, or some volunteering, and take several courses online. So it's possible to do both. It really is.
And you're still confident that every child with this new world can get a great education, young adult can get a great education despite all the craziness going on.
Oh, I'm convinced. For those of us, I mean, my students are well prepared. Students who get into UMBC are well prepared. You see it through the test scores, through the grades. Howard County and Montgomery County have amazing schools. There are some wonderful schools in Baltimore County and some in the city, but in New York and other places. So the students we get tend to be, students are comfortable getting perfect AP exams in math, for example, on the AP calculus, the AB and BC. So they're well prepared, and they know other languages and they've traveled and all that. My concern is much more so for all those children in Baltimore City, in Baltimore County, in some schools, and across our state and in our country who still haven't learned to read well. I'm a mathematician, but I will tell you the number one skill I want to see children develop will be reading and thinking, reading, writing, and thinking. If you give me a child who can read well, I can teach her to solve word problems. I really can. But it's the reading and thinking, and I'm telling you 40–50% of all American children do not learn to read well. And if you don't learn to read well in the 3rd grade, and then I'm always saying by middle school, it's downhill from that. You're not making the progress. But if you read well, and if the child learns to love to read, like Robert, I remember we could have conversations when he was 15 and 16 about Dostoevsky. Just in general about the great authors. So it was a part of him. We need students to see reading as a part of them, as just what they do. And if we get students who are good thinkers, all things are possible.
Beth, questions?
I'm just so, Scott's been touting this visit a lot. And I just want to say, Scott, you did not oversell. I'm so happy to have met you. And I do feel, what you've been saying and sitting here talking to you, I really do feel as if I have. I started my career as a 1st grade teacher. So you're just preaching to the choir here with how important reading is. That was my whole thing. You teach a kid to read, it's giving them the world. So I just really want to thank you so much and for being here, for taking the time. I don't know, Jonathan, do we have questions from the audience?
Yep. So Dr. Hrabowski.
Let's do that.
Yep. So Dr. Hrabowski, I have one question from the audience, and then I have a question for you. So from John in Hamden from Facebook, He says UMBC has made a name for itself as an outstanding academic institution with superior athletics as well. We all remember the great basketball success, some of your wonderful lacrosse success. So here's the question. Will there be UMBC sports in the fall?
And let me say, we have UMBC athletics with superior academic students who are doing quite well with sports. I'm putting that in perspective, right? We're not huge sports. No, we are a nerdy campus. We're very proud of that. And our basketball players and all the other teams across are excellent students first. But yes, we are planning to have very safe and athletics. We're working with others in our conference from University of Vermont to some of the New York institutions, but it is our intention. We're working on beginning to bring people back now, and we'll be doing the kinds of things, the testing and all of that we hear about. But most important, we do plan to have it. It will be different, I'm sure, in terms of audience participation and those kinds of things. But so far, we are saying we're going to be doing it, yes. And we're very proud of our student athletes. They are excellent.
Super. So here's a personal question. So years ago, I had the pleasure of working for Hillel of Baltimore at UMBC, and you led a wonderful Black Jewish Freedom Seder. And I'm wondering if you could just share a few thoughts about why it's so important that the Black and Jewish community continue the dialogue, continue to learn, study, because I just remember that being such a positive experience for the 200 students in that room.
Yes, yeah. I think our understanding more about the plight of each group helps us understand more about humankind. Not only for what has happened in this country, but others, and that movement of Jews from Europe, the movement from the Middle East here. I've been to Israel a number of times. I love the fact that we take children out of the city and from some of the private schools, and we do things to take them to Israel. And I would say several things. I honestly believe that people who have a history of being discriminated against in so many ways have a greater sensitivity to what others have gone through. And when we look at the generosity of the Jewish community, of the associated and beyond, you see that not only to help others of Jewish backgrounds, but in general. When I look at what Bob Meyerhoff and Rita Becker do to help children in Baltimore, beyond the Meyerhoff Program, and it's not just about the money, it is about their interest, their intense interest in understanding what it will take for these children to succeed. And that's for so many other people. Sue Cohen was such a wonderful, we had such incredible conversations about Baltimore City. Walter Sondheim, I can go on and on and on. And so I think it's important for this next generation of people from these backgrounds to understand what the other group has gone through, because it gives a kind of bond. It also says ways in which we can focus on the issues to be as analytical in figuring out what we need to do. And that's part of what I'm saying about universities. We have to get beyond, the protests are important for people to express themselves, but that analytical ability to dissect the problems and to focus on different areas to bring about some progress will be what will make the difference.
Thank you.
Very good. So let me make a couple closing comments and then hand this over to Beth. I know you've got some announcements and such. First of all, Freeman, thank you so much for being here. What I didn't mention is that Freeman took my disaffected high school student 15 years ago. And I walked him into Freeman's office and he was ready to quit high school. And Freeman admitted him that afternoon. So it was right out of early out of high school, and it made the difference. And he's now at Columbia with an MD PhD, a lot because of Freeman. I also want to make sure that we say hello to Jackie, your beautiful wife, and please tell her I said hello. Please, please,
Thank
please.
You.
Okay,
Thank
Beth and Freeman, thank you so much for doing this. We're already run over our time, and I apologize for that. But Beth, let me hand it over to you for final announcements.
Again, thank you so very much. This has been one of the most interesting shows. You are obviously one of the most interesting people we've had the privilege to interview. So I really do thank you for taking the time and sharing the time. And I will look forward to having other conversations with you as we move forward through these times and through my new role. So I want to remind everyone also in the audience that the Associated is having its virtual annual meeting tomorrow night. That's Wednesday, June 17th at 5:30 p.m. Special guests include Governor Larry Hogan, acclaimed filmmaker and Baltimore's very own Barry Levinson, and the Cardinal Sheehan and Krieger Schechter Day School Choir. Go to associated.org/annual meeting to learn more about how to attend. And also be sure to join us next Tuesday, June 23rd at noon for our next show. In the meantime, please continue to visit associated.org and jmoreliving.com for more information, stories, and resources, and to sign up for Jmore's weekly newsletters. I thank you all for coming by today, and stay well.
Thank you, Dr. Hrabowski.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Freeman.
Have a good day.